Welcome to another Good Eye Podcast. I'm Jay Smack, and do you know the difference between punitive justice versus unitive justice? Well, we're going to get into that today and talk about the AUJ's Alliance for Unitive Justice's first Unitive Justice International Conference. We're going to talk to Sara Daves and Sylvia Clute, who have made it their life's work to champion the cause of unitive justice, so they are much better spokespersons for it than I. So let's get into it. Here's my discussion with Sara Daves and Sylvia Clute on today's Good Eye Podcast. And welcome to another Good Eye Podcast. I'm Jay Smack, and here we focus on all things health, wellness, thought, engagement, attention, and intention is kind of what I like to call it. And today I'm excited to have two guests with me. Sylvia Clute and Sara Daves. Sara is no stranger to this platform, but this is Sylvia's first time here. Welcome, Sylvia. It's nice to have you here. We met, I think, originally at the InnerWorks Center at a meeting there, and I found out how closely you and Sara were working together. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's my honor, my pleasure. So why don't we get to know both of you real quick for people that may not be familiar, and then I'd like to talk about all the things you have going on, Sylvia, specifically some stuff coming up in October and some things you've got on the burner that are in progress. And then we'll talk about Sara, who is recently back in the country from her travels across to Africa, and that was an amazing, exciting trip, and we'll find out everything she did over there. So Sylvia, welcome. If you wouldn't mind, maybe just introduce yourself and tell everybody what it is you do and maybe how you connected with Sara.
All right. So first, let me just give the background that I was a trial attorney for 28 years. And what I'm doing now has nothing to do with that. In fact, it's sort of trying to figure out how to fix some of the problems that I experienced during those many years. I am now the president and executive director of the Alliance for Unitive Justice. The Alliance is a nonprofit headquartered in Richmond, Virginia, that teaches unitive justice theory and practices in many different venues. And it also provides services in diverse venues as well. And you mentioned an event in October. What's happening then is the Alliance for Unitive Justice is sponsoring the first Unitive Justice International Conference ever. We're going to have presenters from 3 continents and the Philippines, and it's going to be amazing. It's at the Roslyn Center and online, October 2nd through 4th. And we will have 2 days that specifically have presentations on unitive justice and how it's now being applied in schools, in prisons, in detention centers, in leadership, in religion and spirituality. Unitive justice is a theory, a very sound theory of how we can go from a punitive system, sort of one based in duality consciousness. It's a roadmap for how to go from there to unitive justice, and that does require a unitive consciousness, but with the roadmap and with the support that is available now, it's very possible. So we're doing it. I just finished a program in a prison, and it was totally amazing. We're teaching Unitive UJ Ed, we call it, in 5 schools in Hopewell City, and so many other things are going on. But we hope that people will look into the conference. It's going to be an extraordinary opportunity to discover what's on the cutting edge, groundbreaking efforts that are being made actually around the world by leaders in envisioning a new model of justice, one that's not so adversarial, so harsh, so punitive. So we're very excited about it. You can find information on the Alliance for Unitive Justice website at www.a4uj.org. And the homepage has all of the links to the conference information, the schedule, the presenters, everything.
Okay, a lot to unpack there. First of all, what is unitive justice. I know that you framed it versus punitive justice, and particularly the working word there is unitive. What does that mean to people who may not be familiar with it, and why should they buy in? It's a lot to swallow for people who are not familiar with unitive justice and the practice. We've been taught to think an eye for an eye. You do something wrong, you pay for it in a form of punishment or detention. So unpack that a little bit for us.
All right. So let me just tell you where the first seeds were planted. I was a trial attorney in 1987 when I realized that there are actually two models of justice. Punitive justice, that one you were describing, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and love. Two models of justice, vengeance and love. I knew exactly what the retributive, vengeful model of justice was. That's what I learned in law school, and that's what I offered to my clients. Justice as love, that was a brand new idea. I had no idea what that looked like, but I knew that was true. I knew there had to be justice as love, and I was going to find out what it was and how it works. So over a period of time, what happened, I was practicing law while I was trying to figure this out and reading everything under the sun that I could find that might be relevant. And I realized that there are certain structures that hold up, that sustain the punitive model, although it doesn't work well in many ways, but there are structures that keep it in place. So rules, judgment, hierarchy, deception is very common because the punitive system is not a safe place, to be honest. So out of this journey, there were 14 structures in a punitive system. You're going to find it in every punitive system. And so as I was seeing those, I was asking, okay, now what would be the alternative to each of those? So for example, rules. Punitive system, of course, runs on rules. We have statutes, rules in households and churches everywhere. So, but rules have a lot of problems because they can easily be abused. We need rules. We don't suggest we do away with rules, but we do want our rules to comport with our values. So anyway, what would fulfill that same role of how you set up a system that's safe? That wouldn't be hierarchical, judgmental, and punitive. So rules, from rules to values, is what we do. And values, you don't find them in a book. You find them in your own internal moral compass. With rules, if someone, the rules are in a rule book and you have a list of rules, when you have due process, you have to let people know what the rules are before you punish them for breaking them. So every time a new violation comes up, so for example, I went into a school once and they were giving me the many pages of list of rules. And they said, and a kid just brought a taser to school, so we had to add, don't bring a taser to school to the list. So rules tell you what not to do. Values basically tell you what to do, how to show up no matter what's going on. Loving kindness, honesty, integrity, generosity. So those are the values that in our programs we teach people how to live into, and it's extraordinary. It works so beautifully. And all of the inconsistencies and hypocrisy that exists in a system where punitive justice actually requires two moral standards. So that, if someone hurts me, I get to hurt them back. But the deal is their hurt is immoral and my hurt is moral. But they're thinking their hurt is moral and mine is immoral. So this double standard is a weakness. And in unitive justice, it teaches that it's never moral to harm another. We must deal with, harm that is done. And we don't recommend at all that we immediately abolish jails and prisons and all of those things. What we do seek to do is to slowly build a unitive system as an alternative. And as people learn it, and as circle processes for addressing conflict is available, as people choose that, as opposed to calling the police or suing someone, the unitive system will grow and the punitive system will diminish in importance. So that's the long-term goal.
So really, in order to establish or put the unitive system into play, into practice, It's a long process that you're looking at. And I'm asking that because I was going to ask, how do you convince people the unitive system or the unitive thought process is better, either for themselves, for the individual who has gone against the values / rules? It's a big ask to ask people, all right, forget what you've heard. You're not going to get this sense of vengeance. You know, I'm not sure how we got here. Maybe it's genetic, maybe it's learned, maybe it's an evolutionary device, but we really cling to our sense of vengeance.
Right.
You know, when you're wrong, when you're wronged, you want retribution somehow. How do you convince people to even entertain a system that embraces kindness? And I'll get out of the way here in a second, but where's the cutoff? Is there a cutoff, say murder or something like that? I'm just curious and want to give people something to grasp onto.
Yes. So we are taught to want vengeance when something happens instead of being taught something else. So punitive justice is based on the moral principle of proportional revenge. It says that if someone hurts you, you get to hurt them the same way. So that's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It has to be equal. And if the harm you do is equal to the harm that was done to you, then we say, okay, that's moral. But and that's what we teach our children. So when you spank your children for something that they did, you are teaching them proportional revenge. This is what we do. You do something I don't like or something that violated my rule. This is what happens to you. And they grow up believing that if someone does something they don't like, what do? They have to get vengeance. They have to get their proportional revenge. It's learned. So what we have to do is we have to teach something different. And best of all, begin in the grade schools, which we are now doing. We have our first opportunity to teach Unitive UJ-Ed in 3 grade schools in Hopewell. But what I really need is my PowerPoint. If you could, we have a presentation where we just highlight some of the most striking brokenness in the punitive system. You can look at it. The school to prison pipeline. Is that what we want for our children? Wouldn't it be better to have a different system? When we got tough on crime and the rate of incarceration in this country just escalated, we went from several 100,000 to over 2 million people in prison, not because the rate of crime rose that amount, but because the punitive system can be abused by those who are in control and those who write those rules. And so the politicians found out how to game our fear of crime to get themselves elected. And so they said, they got their 30-second sound bites, abolish parole, 3 strikes, you're out, truth in sentencing. You remember all those political slogans? Yes. And then when they're elected, they wrote them into law. And the rate of incarceration in this country escalated. We have, 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. It was not good policy, other than it served the self-interest of the politicians who used it to get themselves elected. So, we have ways of teaching. And when people begin to see, the punitive system exists largely because of our system blindness. We are in a system supporting structures and things that are going on. Often we're not even aware of them, but if we are aware of them, we often are conditioned to believe that that's how it is. We don't have a choice. So it is a matter of introducing alternatives. However, you can talk about it. It's not until you experience unitive justice. And another word for that is justice as love. When you experience justice as love, you will know that punitive justice is not the best we can do. So Sara teaches an amazing class where people get to experience, they learn how to create and implement justice as love. And the people who come out of her class who have experienced that over and over, because it's a year-long class, they're amazing. They have, it's a personal transformation. I just taught it in the prisons to 12 men who are incarcerated. And it's the same there, So when we had the graduation actually last Monday. And when we went around and said, what's your main takeaway? Probably close to half of them, or maybe half of them said, this taught what I've already been trying to do. But this, having the theory and, the practice, it gave words to it. And they said it gave me a plan for how to stay on track. That was the proof of our concept for that particular class. Yeah. And prisons are actually a wonderful place to teach this because it takes time and they have time.
Do you have any numbers on how unitive justice classes like that have addressed recidivism and how many people it's affected in that light?
So we just did our first test class, and we were not able to have researchers there. We had researchers who were very eager to research this, but they said, no, not yet, just do your class. We'll see how it goes. But the next one, we will have research done on it. However, there is evidence of it because that class called Unitive Prison Culture Change is based on the work of two men who Sara and I know well and now work with, Paul Taylor, who now goes by Taylor Paul, and Weldon Prince Bunn. They were incarcerated for over 20 years for first-degree murder. But while in prison, they figured out that they could get out. They could get out of prison if they could transform themselves and transform the prison culture. Anyway, they figured out how to bring justice as love into the prison. They never heard of the term justice as love or unitive justice, but they figured out how to do it because they were in a crucible where it was either face death in prison or change everything you do. You can't keep doing what you used to do and you'll get out. And they did exactly that. And in the course of that, they were teaching the men who were going home. And during that time, they were determined that the recidivism rate in Virginia was going to go down. And they were telling them, when you go out there, you have to keep doing this, can't come back. And in fact, while they were teaching that, Virginia went from being number one and having the lowest recidivism rate, being number two. They were behind Oklahoma. They went from being number two in the nation to being number one in the nation and having the lowest recidivism rate. And leaders from the Department of Corrections came to the prison and told them that achievement was in part due to their work.
Wow. So just to clarify, was it sort of born at that point? The theory, not necessarily born.
Oh, no. But this has lasted every bit as long as punitive justice and perhaps longer. But your efforts. Oh, mine. So mine was born when I figured out as a trial attorney that there were two models of justice. Mm-hmm. For Taylor and Prince, it was born when they were faced with that existential crisis so they had life plus 25 years and life plus 80 years. But it was before we abolished parole. So they had a chance of getting out if they could achieve parole. So for them, it was born out of a commitment that they were not dying in prison. And so when I met them, and they were in prison, they didn't know what the Quakers do. The Quakers have justice as love. They figured that out. And in many other places. But when I met them, and they had figured this out in prison, and they didn't have, the resources, anyway, they got it because they went inside themselves. Mm-hmm. And I know that justice as love is within us. If we can overcome our conditioning and our attachment to retributive justice, what is going to show up is justice as love. So actually, retributive justice, when you're in that, it's because you are blind to the love that exists. So when you can get those blinders off your eyes, you're going to step out of punitive justice and you will be present to justice as love. And that's what they did. But it's been around as long as human beings have been here. Mm-hmm. That's a part of our humanity.
All really interesting points. And I think what contributes to those blinders is the desire to take some sort of control. And I'm talking about the people that we need to convince. That's why I come in from the cynical approach to understand how to convince people that this can work. Because when you say things like justice as love to someone who is just encountering unitive justice, it sounds woo-woo. It sounds pie in the sky. It doesn't sound achievable. And especially if you are, say, the family member of someone who's been wronged by someone who is now in prison and rotting away, which is why I want to transition to Sara at this point, because she is, I mean, the two of you together, you having been an attorney and Sara's path, Sara's about the most convincing testimonial I can possibly think of, considering her path, how she ended up here. I'd like to hear, Sara, from you, how you connected with Sylvia and kind of what brought you to where you are. And I need to mention to people that they should look you up, saradaves.com, as a manifest and purpose coach, because you overcame all of those, I think, very human instincts to want revenge and become cynical and become bitter and go inside yourself, to come to a point where you're making a huge difference along with Sylvia, the dynamic duo here of the two of you. So if you don't mind, like, bringing us up to speed on your path and how you got to this point, and then we'll talk about the Trey Junior School.
Sure. Yeah. So Sylvia and I met through a mutual friend somewhere around 2010 or 11. And this was around the time that my son, I call it being captured by the punitive system. So he was at the very beginning of this. And he ended up spending 5 years in prison for a crime that he did not commit. And during this time, right at the beginning of that, I believe what was happening, Sylvia, I think you and I were trying to figure out how to work the process of unitive justice and teach do in that manner. But I did not have any resources at the time to support my son financially. And that is why he ended up in the prison system the way he did, because we could not afford to participate in the punitive system in the way you're expected to. So once he was there, we just held on tight and had lots of hope. And when it was over, my son died 6 weeks later. And, and there's foul play in that, but I would never want any person, much less a young man, to have to go into the prison system and deal with what my son went through. He would not have wanted that either. And so that really tested my faith. I mean, I was already, committed to unitive justice. I had Sylvia's book by my bedside table. I would read it every night while I was living in DC for, several years. And then, when I came home, Sylvia and I reconnected after my son passed, and I started coming back to the workshops and helping to co-teach and things like that. And then when COVID hit, we started doing online classes, started at BCU. And then I just decided, or Sylvia asked me to continue teaching. And so we just started doing these pilots, a few months at a time, going through each level through theory and process and all of that. And that turned into a year-long program that has worked exceptionally well to create the mindset shift that is necessary to overcome the conditioning. And like Sylvia said, this is already inside of us. Like, we already know this on a fundamental level. And the way that Sylvia has developed the theory is that it's like that coming home to yourself. And it offers the validation of that, of our shared humanity.
The coming home, I'm writing that down because while you were thinking, you also mentioned the conditioning. There's something about vengeance and anger that on its surface is really reassuring. We cling to it for some reason, that feeling of I'm going to get mine and nobody can get to me. But when you can shed that, and I'm just talking on a personal level, maybe a daily reflection, or if prayer is your thing, or whatever it is, counting your blessings, exercises of gratitude. When you do that, you do feel that cloak of anger and cynicism kind of slough off. And unitive justice, to me, not understanding it to the degree that you do, kind of feels like that. And again, I keep wanting to go back to the people who say, that's ridiculous, eye for an eye. And I don't just mean vengeance. I mean people who really do heinous and horrible things. But to your point, Sylvia, working with grade school children, reaching these people at the source, and by these people, I just mean people who may end up later in the punitive justice systems somehow, reaching them at the source. And that, again, brings me back quickly to Sara. It wasn't good enough for you to just be doing your work here. You had to take it to another continent. Can you tell us about the Trey Junior School and have that get going? You just got back. You just got back from Uganda. And our friend Rick Juarez was over there for a little while, with you for a little while, from Dear Future. Tell us about the Trey Junior School and how that came to be, and how it was going when you had to come back.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I spent 6 months in Uganda in the Wakiso district, and to support the school in a small village. The children, so basically how this happened is Rick and I connected, and then we were able to figure out how we were going to raise money for this school to be built, because the founder of the Namuga Mabel Foundation, that's Mabel, she wanted to turn this school into a Unitive Justice school, and this was going to be the first Unitive Justice school ever built for that purpose in the world that we know of. And then, we've got some Unitive Justice schools right here in the Richmond metro area. There's that. This Trey Junior School is a sister school too. So when I talked with Mabel to find out how this will work, and to make sure that this is actually what she wanted for the school, she said, absolutely, I want this. She said, and I have a surprise for you. I didn't want to tell you till you got here, but we're naming the school after your son. And so that did it for me. She said everything that he went through, I've told the women of the village, and they want to name the school after him. So I decided that I would come back. I'll come home from my book tour and be with Sylvia to build these handbooks together and to raise the money for the school to be built. We raised $20,000 in a matter of a month and a half, 2 months. And then I was planning to go for a few months, and Sylvia said, no, you need to go longer than that. It's not long enough. And so I thought about it, and she was right. And so I ended up being there for 6 months. We went through all of the training with all of the teachers at Trey Junior School to learn the unitive system, as well as a group of community leaders who learned conflict resolution facilitation. So the trainings were a little bit different, but very close. And this created a strong community. So these community leaders and teachers work together now. They support one another. And we've seen some amazing progress in a very short period of time at the school.
Wow. Are you going back? Are you going back? Yeah. Next year?
Yes, I will be going back sometime next year. I'm not exactly sure when, but some of the 2 people who were trained as conflict resolution facilitators will be here this year to speak at the conference. So That's pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah. Let's jump back to the conference. Sylvia, tell us a little bit about what people can expect. But before we jump into that, I want to emphasize a point that you made earlier, and that is that unitive justice, you're not proposing that unitive justice somehow miraculously replace the current justice system, punitive justice, or anything really. You just want it added to the consideration of the curriculum. Is that correct? I mean, in the short term, I guess I should say.
Um, Actually, in order for us to believe that punitive justice is justice, we have to live in duality consciousness. Duality consciousness is consumed with fear. So you said, people, oh, they want to get their revenge. Yeah, in duality consciousness, you do. You're fearful, you have to protect yourself or whatever, your property, whatever. So you have to, fight and be aggressive and all of that. So when people are in duality consciousness, they cannot understand, they can't conceive of justice as love. So it has to be a journey of understanding that there's another way of being in the world, of seeing the world. And as I said before, the best way for that to happen is to experience what happens. So we use unitive justice circles, the conflict resolution circles that Sara was talking about. So people come to the circle process. There are 3 questions we ask in this circle process. And so they come, they want retribution and revenge. So the first step is to come to mutual understanding. So we use reflective listening. Everybody has to hear everybody else. Everyone has to know that they were heard. And when they hear, where someone else was coming from, what their rationale was, because when we do terrible things, we have a reason in our head. So when they find that out, then that begins to shift things. And then the second stage of the circle, we really hope that they will see the underlying brokenness out of which the conflict arose. Every conflict comes out of a context. It doesn't just appear in the air. It comes out of an underlying brokenness. And when we ignore that underlying brokenness, as happens in the criminal courts, not only is there not a way to address the underlying brokenness in a criminal court, in almost all cases, it is excluded as collateral evidence. They do not allow consideration of it. So in our circle process, the second stage is for people to see that underlying brokenness. And when that happens, sometimes I say it's a miracle. They see their shared humanity. And when you connect at the level of your shared humanity, it doesn't matter what someone did in the past. You don't want to hurt them. Mm-hmm. That level of connection, you do not want to hurt them. And as soon as that happens, and you've got the blinders off, and you're not just, how am I going to get even? But you see the underlying brokenness, you feel the connection to, this other person, then you can see possibilities you could never see when you wanted revenge. And those possibilities are how you, with what you have right now, how you can begin to address the underlying brokenness, and how you and the others in the circle can go forward together. So instead of having conflicting goals, which the punitive system runs on conflicting goals, that's what keeps everybody mad and angry and aggressive and what have you. In a unitive system, we have a process for getting to a place where you see unitive goals and you see the past differently. So those are 2 stages that people have to go through. But in this circle process, we're human beings, we're programmed to show up differently. And when we're given the opportunity to do that, most people do. I can't even begin to tell you. Sara, what's it like to be in the circle process when this place comes where people see the past differently, they see their shared humanity, and they see how they can go forward together?
Yeah, so we do the circle process. We call them insight circles. We use them for practice and learning in the online classes as well. I did this in Uganda as well. And what everyone sees is that they're wounding all of their conflicts that are happening in their lives as a result of earlier wounding, personally. So they begin to understand that it doesn't matter if a conflict pops up over here and you try to solve it with a Band-Aid rule or something like that. And then another one pops up over here. And then all of a sudden you've got all these conflicts. And with one circle, all of those conflicts become resolved because it's all attached to the same wound. So really, conflict is the bridge between separation and connection. Because what we realize is that, instead of blaming or taking all of our anger out on an external force or person, we can see how we showed up, and we can take responsibility for the way that we showed up in the conflict. Now, one of the things that's kind of hard for people to wrap their heads around, and I get the question all the time, is like, well, what about accountability? Mm-hmm. People have to be held accountable for their actions. But actually, punishment removes accountability because the punishment becomes the accountability. So the person doesn't really get to understand the depth of pain that was caused in the conflict. And so when we come together in the circle process, what happens is that, first of all, that mutual understanding comes, the recognition of the shared humanity begins to surface, and then true accountability happens organically without anyone having to make anyone do anything. And it happens every single time. Mm-hmm. And so what we're noticing in the circle process that we're doing, Unitive Justice circle process, is that there are these beautiful synchronicities that begin to surface. So someone brings a conflict, and this isn't in my classroom, okay? So someone brings a conflict, someone role plays the person that they're in conflict with. This is how we practice. We have one person who's a facilitator, one person who is a co-facilitator, and everyone is observing. Everyone else, is observing. And by the end of the circle, it's not just the person who brought the conflict that receives healing. It's the role player. It's the observer. It's the facilitator, because there is a link. It's as if our wounds are so similar. Like the conflict is the story, right? That's the external story. And everybody has their own set of details for their particular story or their life movie, as it were. But when it comes right down to it, when we do recognize our shared humanity, we recognize that our wounds are the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me, and not to be reductionist, but it reminds me of a meditation practice where you're observing your thoughts. And we realize at some point, hopefully, people say, people might think new to meditation. Oh, meditation, it's about quieting your mind and reaching a higher consciousness. Not really. It's really just paying attention. That's it. But that is so hard. That is such a challenge to see your thoughts and understand we are not our thoughts. They're just appearing in consciousness. And yet, when we all are subject to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, which within the human condition, we react. And if we can come together and sort of put a face, put a sign on that thing, oh, that's anger, that's anxiety, as opposed to just experiencing it. And it reminds me again, I'm hesitant to be too reductionist about that because it is so vital, and there's a lot of people who have hurt a lot within families and victims of crime and committers of crime. But it reminds me of an illustration I saw that it just said war at the top, and it was two people running at each other with guns, and one guy's going to say, I don't want to kill this guy, but he wants to kill me, so I have to kill him first. And they're both saying the exact same thing. Neither one of them want to be there. The human condition is shared by all of us, but we see ourselves on these islands of unique experience, and our experience is just not that unique. Let's go back to the conference. What people can expect if they're like, wow, this sounds interesting. How can I check it out? What do I have to do? Do I have to be somewhere at a certain time? What do I have to, commit to, et cetera, et cetera? A little bit more background there, Sylvia.
Okay, so the conference is at the Roslyn Retreat Center on River Road in Richmond, Virginia. And we will be there 3 days. There's room and board available and meals there available for people, but it's also online. So you can be anywhere in the world and join, the live streaming of the conference. And those who join will have access to the video for 3 months afterwards. So there's going to be a lot of content that people will want time to absorb. So actually, the first morning is the UJ Ed program in Hopewell, in the 5 schools in Hopewell. And right after that comes Sarah's UJ Ed program in Uganda. I'm really glad we're going first and not after that, because Sarah's, I mean, I don't know another word for what happened in Uganda other than a miracle. I mean, it is truly, truly extraordinary. Now, they didn't go in and say, okay, you can keep all your rules. We're just going to introduce this slowly. They went in and said, no kid's going to be punished in this school. And that, when you come, you're going to hear about it. You have to come to hear about it. And then also, so I mentioned the prison program. The prison program is out of the work that Taylor and Prince did in prison, when they figured out how to transform the prison culture, because they had to, and it worked so beautifully. And, Taylor says, I figured out that being on the side of right is not so bad after all. They have a lot of sayings that they came up with in this journey. But as I was working with them and working on the training program, actually we spent 3 years. We started the first prison program on May 15th. That was preceded by 3 years of taping, editing videos. There was a lot of footage we edited, and preparing the written materials. So out of all of that work came a criminology theory. And it's an amazing criminology theory. So there's a new field of criminology called peacemaking criminology or therapeutic criminology. And it's various, usually people in academia who are coming up with better ways to fix those people. And what Paul and Prince did, of course, Taylor and Prince, was they figured out that those people can be the fix. So Unitive Justice criminology is predicting the conditions in which the people who were the problem can become the solution. And that is like, oh my goodness. I mean, wow. So we're doing that, and we're working on getting Unitive Justice in detention centers. And a woman is teaching Unitive Justice at Rutgers Law School. And one person's going to be talking about Unitive Justice in the area of religion and spirituality, and Unitive Justice in leadership. And so it's basically a principle that applies in any aspect of life. And we're finding out that it's a good theory. So it does provide a roadmap for going from that punitive system to a unitive system. It's a lot of people would think of it as being like restorative justice because we use circle processes, but restorative justice, and it's under the very large umbrella of restorative justice, but restorative justice began in the criminal courts. And so they were going to hold the offender accountable in a better way. And it has done that, and a lot of wonderful things has happened in restorative justice, but it never had an underlying theory. There's not even a definition that's agreed upon. So as a result, restorative justice programs are all over the place. In fact, in Virginia now, at this point in time, they're calling isolation in prison restorative housing. So we have a theory. You can know, we know when you're on track and when you're not on track. So that's a very important part of this, but all of it fits in together, in the schools, we want to have the students who have the most problems, who might be in gangs or absenteeism or food insecurity or whatever it might be, that are causing absenteeism, and conflict in the school. We can use the same principle with them. So we begin to teach them unitive justice principles and ask them to be leaders in the school in changing the school culture. So we're looking to the students who were the problem to create the conditions in which they help become the solution. It's like Oh my goodness, this is so much better than what we've been doing, and it works so beautifully. And that's what they're going to find out if they come to this conference. So to get the information, the AUJ website, the number 4uj.org, has all of the information and the links to the whole, how to register, the whole thing.
Excellent.
And we do have some scholarships for people who really want to come, but the registration fee is a hurdle.
And that's a4uj.org?
Yes, .org.
Okay, .org.
Did I say .org?
No, I had
anyway, yes.
I had .com written down, so I was wrong.
Yeah, no, it's .org.
Not commercial, it's organization.
Yeah, we are a nonprofit.
Okay. Cool. Amazing. Let's pimp some books. Sylvia, you have a book coming out, and Sara had one come out late last year. Right, Sara? Wasn't that about the time it came out, late last year?
Exactly 1 year ago.
Yeah, a year ago. Sara, why don't you talk about your book first, and then Sylvia, yours is about to come out, from what I understand. We'll get into that. But Sara, tell us about your book.
Yeah. Okay. So my book is called Manifest Like a Goddess, and it came out of a program that I created in my coaching practice. And there are many unitive elements in that book, actually, because Unitive Justice is the foundation of everything that I do. But it basically is just a fun way to learn, about yourself, practice self-awareness, and take that manifesting journey.
Which you have done.
Yeah.
Which you have absolutely done. Sylvia, how's your book coming along?
So actually, I'm working on my third book.
Sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Yeah, my first book was a novel. The first version was called Destiny, and then that was pre 9/11. And I thought, well, maybe I need to make it more post 11 type world. So I rewrote it, and that's Destiny Unveiled. And then people told me, well, I don't read novels. So I thought, okay, I have to write one that isn't a novel. And so that was Beyond Vengeance, Beyond Duality, a call for a conscious revolution. And now what I'm writing is sort of my years of experience and all that I've learned about unitive justice. It is called Unitive Justice, Bending the Arc of Justice Towards Love. And I hope it will be out before the conference. We're trying to have that happen. But anyway, we are at the final stages of editing and proofreading, formatting, all of that. So we're headed down the line. But yeah, Unitive Justice, Bending the Arc of Justice Towards Love. And that is what we're doing.
Well, you're both doing amazing work. I don't want to wrap it up yet, but I do want to say that, for those who think you can't hold back the sea, they should take a look at what you two are doing, and your whole community, not just the two of you. I understand that, but you're out in front of it. And before I let you go, is there anything we haven't talked about you'd like to bring up? I don't want to let you go until you address everything you'd like to.
Well, Sylvia, if you don't have anything, I could talk just for a minute about what Trey Junior School experienced.
Oh, please
yeah.
do. Please do. That is the proof of the theory.
Okay. So at Trey Junior School, there's no punishment of any kind. Actually, circles have replaced punishment, and values have replaced rules. And all conflicts are handled in UJ circles. The children can request a circle at any time. So that means that children have a say in the way that they learn, and they all have agreed. So basically this is agreements instead of rules. Everyone has agreed to live by their value system, the teachers and the students alike. So they decided what those were for each class, and they drew pictures of them and posted them on the wall so they can be reminded. What has happened is the school has become a safe space to be authentic. The children didn't have a voice before. When we did our first circles, I went around the circle and asked everyone their names, and I couldn't hear them. And they weren't even whispering; they were lip syncing, really. Now they're bold and they feel safe, so they're authentic. We even had an 8-year-old negotiate a land deal to expand the school after the New Mabel Foundation actually failed to negotiate that deal. An 8-year-old student from Trey Junior School did it. And so, this just proves that, what this does, what's easier for children anyway, but these children are becoming leaders. They're learning how to do that from a very authentic space, and their grades are off the charts. There are people who come from the villages to the school to visit because they see the kids have uniforms for safety reasons. But so they know the school they go to, they come to the school and they're like, your children are wonderful. They greet us and they're helpful and all of these things. And so that's just a little bit. There's a lot more, but I'm going to say all that. I'll explain all of that at the conference.
Well, that is absolutely amazing. I love the good grades too, just because, like I say, I want to be an advocate, but I know that you got to give people something to hang on to, something they can see. They need proof, they need empirical evidence, and so that is just amazing. Because intuition, for some of us, not better or worse. It's just some people are driven from a more emotional state. Some people need hard data, and I get that and I respect that. So it's amazing that it's working, and I think what you're both doing is just incredible, and I wish you both the best of luck. SaraDaves.com, SylviaClute.com, and a4uj.org. Coming up in October, a4uj.org for information. Thank you both for being here. I appreciate it so much. Appreciate your time, attention, and intention.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yes, this was wonderful.
Thank you again to Sara and Sylvia for their work and, of course, their dedication to Unitive Justice. And you can find out more about both of them, as I mentioned before, at SaraDaves.com. That's SARA Daves.com, and SylviaClute.com. To register for the conference and find out more, go to4uj.org, and the podcast website is at goodeyepodcast.com. Hit me up, j@jsmack.com, with any feedback or booking requests or conversation ideas. Always love hearing from you. Thank you very much for your time and attention and intention today, and I'll see you here real soon, hopefully on another Good Eye Podcast.